Welcome to another Maamar we learned today in the Mizgeres of Project Melukat. This Maamar being learned l'schus, l'nishmas, our beloved Shiur, Akiva Wagner. The Maamar we learned today is the Maamar of Eikev Tishmun Tavshach of Zayin. It was said on Shabbos Parshas Eikev. It was Chaf Menachemov, which is the day of the passing of the Rebbe's father, I believe Yitzchak. The Rebbe Farbring then, it was Chafaf was on Shabbos. The Rebbe said two Maamarim. They're both mugeh, both edited. The first was in Tavshim Mem Zayin, the Kuntis that we're learning now. The second Maamar was Mugeh Vata Yisrael, Tavshim Mem Tes 2 years later. The Nekud of our Maamar, very interesting, is really about the essence of Mesiras Nefesh, what it's all about. And the Rebbe mentions how, obviously related to his father, which was persecuted due to his efforts in spreading Yiddishkeit in Russia, and eventually this caused that he should literally die on Mesiras Nefesh. The Melukat Rebbe explains here why Mesiras Nefesh is so necessary, what it accomplishes, and why this is the specific and unique avodah which is necessary in Eikev and the Mashiach, the last generations of Golus, when the darkness is so great, and why this is specifically the avodah which will create the Giluim, all the revelations that we'll experience when Mashiach comes. And the Rebbe concludes how today Mesiras Nefesh in its literal sense is not necessary because it was already accomplished through these great tzaddikim, and we can have Mesiras Haratzin. Nefesh also means a person's will. So let's get right in there. Maamar begins the pasuk in the parsha of Hoya, Eikev Tishmun. It will be when you will listen. Shmartem v'asisamoisim, and you will guard the mitzvahs. That's known the question of mitzvahs. We know fulfillment of mitzvahs is reliant on the person's free choice. Why does the Torah say Eikev, which means when you will listen? It should have said if you will listen. Like we have throughout Dvarim, and even in our parsha itself, we have a pasuk if you will listen, or if you will follow instructions of the Eibusher, because ultimately it's our choice. So why does he say Eikev when you will listen, as if it's absolute? The Eikev koyal mandik to Mashiach. The Tzemach Tzedek answers, and really our entire Maamar is going to be used on this Maamar of the Tzemach Tzedek, that the concept of Eikev, which means heal, refers to the time of Eikev and Mashiach, which is the last generation before Geula, which literally means the footsteps of Geula, of Mashiach. So by Eikev Tishmun, and therefore we can say with absolute clarity that Jewish people will fulfill Torah mitzvahs. Tishmun vade. Why? The Torah should say Yisrael less is true, but say have the Rambam says, brings the Gemara that Torah promises that ultimately before Geula every single Jew will do tshuva. Therefore, because Eikev is the time of Eikev and Mashiach, the last generation of Golus, we're certain that the Jewish people will indeed return to the Eibusher. The Tzemach that continues, Gimel Shenis Tishmun, Shmartem Asisem, it says, Vay Eikev Tishmun, you'll listen, you'll guard, and you'll do. What are the three terms? This is avodah with a person's thought, speech, and action. Tishmun machshava, when a person hears something, really ultimately it's in the mind. Ikra Shmiyo b'machshava, the ultimate listening happens in the head. The oizen, which is the ear, is just the vessel through which the voice or the idea can enter the mind. So hearing something, when I hear what you say, it really means I'm perceiving a concept. Shmartem, the second concept, to shmir, which means to guard, is dibur, is the concept of speech. Why? Ikra shmiru b'peh, the way you guard something is through saying it. Which comes by Torah says, the Gemara says that a person needs to learn Torah actually by verbalizing with his mouth, and the reason for this is when I actually say it, that is when it's going to be guarded, I'm not going to forget it. And vasisim, obviously the third term is you will do, which is maaseh. And the pasuk continues and says, if a person will indeed have machshav divrei maaseh, the Eibusher as well will reciprocate, he will guard the bris, the chesed, asher nishba, which is the covenant, the kindness that he has promised. And the Tzemach Tzedek explains in the Maamar how bris, chesed, v'shua, as well as machshava divrei maaseh v'shah barucha, like he explains there at length. When a Jew has the avodah of thought, speech, and action properly, we as well receive from on high the Eibusher's thought, speech, and action, which basically means Hashem reveals himself, Gilalikus, which is Geula, like we'll explain. Ultimately, the Rebbe says it can't be that the purpose, the reason why the Neshama comes down is just to do the avodah machshav divrei maaseh and receive Hashem's machshav divrei maaseh. Why? This concept that a person receives the thought, speech, and action from Hashem is not enough. Why? The neshama came from the greatest, highest level of thought. HaMachshava Shel Mayla, Machshava is the greatest levush. We come from the greatest, highest essence within levush, like it says, Yisrael al Machshava, the Eibishter. Machshava is where the Jewish people are sourced. We are coming down to this world, obviously, to reach a greater ascent, a greater aliyah than it was before we came down. Obviously, the purpose is, through the descent down here into our world, we should accomplish a greater level, reach a higher place than before we came down. We were trying to reach as a place of v'atam mishamar b'kibur, we say every morning in a kind of shamash hasatabi tahirahi, which is the greatest, highest level, referring to Atzilus, and we say Atabarasi, Tzarta, Atanafachta, which refers to the next element, is Bri, Tzirasiya. Ultimately, there's Va'ata Mishamar B'kirbi, the essence of Hashem, Va'ata, the you, which guards it all, which is higher than all the elements. We are trying to reach as well the level of Va'ata, the essence of Hashem, Mishamra. And that's what the pasuk says, Va'ata Mishamra, right? Zamash Gatsa V'shamra, but it doesn't just say the Abishah is going to reveal Machshav D'Maisa. It says V'shamar, he will guard V'ata Mishamra, alluding to this level of essence of Hashem, which will be infused within the Machshav D'Maisa of Hashem. What's pshat? Eikev Tishmun Shmar D'Masisem, when we as well do Machshav D'Maisa, but not regularly, through Eikev, which means Havoida Machshav D'Maisa ba Eikev the Neshama. First of all, we do it with the heel of the Neshama, referring to the part of the Neshama that descends, it comes down to Koyal Neshama Shabaguf, the part that is embodied. Ubefrat Vizn Mashicha, and one step down, not just any time in history, but the time of the heels of Geula, which obviously means we're having a much deeper descent, which ultimately increases the ascent. We're trying to reach, again, the highest level of Atam Mishar Mekiri, so through the greatest Yerida of Eikev, not just in the person, but in the timeline. This when a person comes down into a body, specifically in exile. Now, ultimately, the only way for a person to truly stay strong is through self-sacrifice, which is completely higher than the regular system. When we say V'hoyo Eikev, Tishmun, Shmarta B'Sisim, we're not just saying a Jew has the Avodah Machshav D'Maisa properly, but we mean Eikev. He does it with Mesiras Nefesh. Through that, Al Dei Zev Shamar, we as well are going to have Bris, Chesed, Nishma, Machshav D'Maisa of the Eibishter, but with Vishamar, Vishamar Daikev, and Machshav D'Maisa Shalmali, and Megillah, the Ata Shar Mekir, we're going to have the revelation of Va'ata, the essence of Hashem, Mishamra, the guarding, the Kirbi, within me, the Chol Sin Gila Atzmus, which is the revelation of Atzmus, which is the Geula. So that is the Nekuda of the first Ois, summarizing part of the Tzemach Tzedek, and Maamar the Tzemach Tzedek. We're through the Avodah of Ikas and Meshicha, and that's the time when we're certain Jewish people indeed are going to do tshuva. That is when we have Mesiras Nefesh, we have Eikev, and then we receive the Eibishas Chashav D'Maisa, but not just Stam, a revelation of Hashem, but the essence of Hashem, the Vishamar, the Ata Vishamra. Continuing in Beis, we continue with another Pirush. In what does Eikev mean? Hine Pirush and Allah Tzemach Tzedek by Eikev Tishmun. This pshat of the Tzemach Tzedek in the words Eikev. Eikev in Melashon Sefer Kalachas, which refers to the end of time. Yesh l'kash is a Maamar Medrash. We're going to connect it to the Medrash al Pasuk Omer Lama Kadosh Baruch Hu Schari Schara Mitzvah Beikev Nesilchem. I'm going to give you the reward for mitzvahs in Eikev as well, which is the end of time. Shenemar by Eikev Tishmun, like it says, Eikev, when it will be at the end, Tishmun, that's when you will perceive, you will hear, which also means you'll receive the schar. Ella, the Rebbe says, obviously there's a distinction here. Alpia Medrash Arab Schar Mitzvah, according to the Medrash, which explains V'hoya Eikev Tishmun is referring to the time when the Jewish people receive the schar for their mitzvahs. When do we receive the schar? This is after the Gula already comes. It says Hayoim La Soisam. Today we do that. When Mashiach comes, that's when we will receive the schar. Ultimately, according to the Tzemach Tzedek's Pshat, we're really the simple meaning. When Eikev means Tishmun, Shmarta V'Asisim, doing Torah mitzvahs, that doesn't apply to the time of Mashiach. Shmarta V'Asisim B'Aisam. Hakavana B'Eikev, obviously the simple meaning of Eikev is Achras Yom Hu L'Seis Managos. So we have here two Mefarshim. We have the simple meaning, which it means the last stage of Golos when we do Torah mitzvahs. We have the Pirush of the Medrash, which is the first stage of Geula when we're already receiving the reward. And the connection between these two Pirushim. Again, the Rebbe would many times say when you have different Pirushim on the same pasuk or the same word, they have to be interlinked and connected. What's the connection? The the reward the Jewish people receive in the world to come, in the time of Mashiach. We're going to have a revelation of the essence of Hashem. Like the Alter Rebbe explains, ultimately, how do we accomplish and create the revelation of Hashem's essence? The Mashiach comes through us revealing our essence, which is Mesiras Nefesh. Through the avodah in the darkest time of Golus, the hardest time, when we need to come to the concept of Mesiras Nefesh, that's when Mesiras Nefesh is dominant. That is the greatest means of service, is in the darkest times through literal self-sacrifice. Through that we're going to receive the revelation of Geula, Eikev Neislechem. So what we ultimately say here is the way we create Geula is through the Avodah, specifically in the last generation. Why? Geula is Etzem, the Eibusher's essence. It only happens when a Jew needs to reveal his own essence. When everything is fine, the time of the Zman HaBayis, we didn't need to reveal our essence. Ultimately, we weren't really preparing for the time of Gilui Atzmus. The Rebbe Neis Gimel now is going to really go down to the real beer of the Maamar. What does Etake mean? We are creating the revelations of Geula, specifically through the Avodah Mesiras Nefesh. And the real question can be asked is, what about the rest of time? The Jewish people were doing Torah mitzvahs for thousands of years. Why are we saying that specifically the Avodah before the time of Geula and the Eikev of the Mashiach and the heels, that is where the entire revelation of Geula is being created from. It's being given to us as, it's being reciprocated. So the Rebbe brings here the Tanya. Tanya, the Alter Rebbe writes that the complete revelations of the time of Mashiach and Tchias HaMeisim are dependent in our Meisim, in our acts, in our Avodah, our service in the time of Golus. Now the Rebbe is going to bring here a vort from the Rebbe's father. The Rebbe's father had Hagoyis. He had little comments that he wrote on the Tanya, and we're going to see also here Lahafli, in a phenomenal way how the Rebbe is medayik in the teachings of the Rebbe's father. Obviously, this is a Maamar connected to the Rebbe's father. The Rebbe's father is Milula. So, my father, Adoni Avi Meir Rabbi, writes in his notes in the margin of the Sefer Tanya, and the Rebbe writes a little bit of historical fact. That for many years they were in captivity. In other words, we didn't have access to them. Bisman Acher Nifdu, and most recently is when they were revealed, when they were redeemed. Sefer Tanya Shalei Meit Svarim Shalei, which was a couple Svarim, including his Tanya. Ma'ashiv Gilakan, they were just brought. So this is already the note. The Rebbe's father writes the two Lashonis, the two terms, Maseinu v'Avedisenu. The Alter Rebbe says again, we are creating the revelations of Geula through Maseinu v'Avedisenu, our actions and our service. Yuvan will understand these two terms, from what the Alter Rebbe explains later in Igeres HaKodesh, Siman Yud Beis, look there in Siman Yud Beis, you'll see what exactly is the significance of these two terms of Maisa and Avodah. Then he continues, right, if you look closely at the words, the Alter Rebbe says, so the Rebbe's father teaches Meisa Mashiach is connected to Maseinu. Tchias HaMeisim is connected to Avodah. We need Avodah to create the resurrection, and we need our actions to create the Meisa Mashiach. So what does this all mean? So first the Rebbe is going to say this simple taich, but the Rebbe is going to say no. It's a little much, much deeper, because the Rebbe's father's words, every word has a lot in it. So the simple meaning why the Rebbe's father alludes to the Igeres HaKodesh, the Siman Yud Beis, the 12 Siman in the letters of the Alter Rebbe. Very simply, the Alter Rebbe explains here the difference between the term action versus service. Kisham, now it's a quote. Kisham shem ma'aseh neifel adav shekvar nasa yishanasa tamim mimela. The word ma'aseh, which means action, applies to something which is done or is being done constantly. It's something which is present and it just happens constantly. In other words, it doesn't take a lot of effort. Ma'aseh. On the other hand, when we talk about service, avodah, this applies to something which is completely against your nature. It takes tremendous effort. A person is able to oppress, or a person is able to mevatel, to nullify his own nature in light of the greater picture in the Eibusher's will. That is when you can call it avodah. Simply, what is understood from here? That so when the Rebbe's father is comparing the two, you can say simply when the Alter Rebbe says Ma'aseinu v'Deseinu, which means actions and service, Ma'aseinu koyal kim ter mitzvah k'yeteva hergel. Ma'aseinu would apply to the regular seder avodah. A person does Torah mitzvahs naturally because he's in a certain routine. But avodah seinu koyal yigib ter mitzvah k'yeteva hergelus, and then avodah would refer to when a person does Torah mitzvahs with tremendous effort. So that's the simple meaning here. The Alter Rebbe uses two terms, Maisa and Avodah. Look at the Eikev, we explain the two terms. Maisa would mean just doing it out of routine. Avodah would mean putting special effort. The Rebbe says it can't be taich. Why? He's medayik in every word here. It says Yuvan, you'll understand the two terms. So Yuvan means there's something more. What does he conclude with? Ayin Sham, check there, check the mucker. Meaning, it's not just that he's bringing a comparison, it's not just that he's like reminding you that over there it's explained, which typically, if you just read the regular pshat, Ma'aseinu means Ma'isa, V'Deseinu means Avodah, it means actions and service. It's not really, you don't need the Alter Rebbe in the Eikev to explain to me the difference between actions and service. For the fact that you say, Ayin Sham, look there, we're going to understand what this means according to that. In other words, the Rebbe is saying there's much more here. You have to really understand deeply and contemplate the concepts explained in Siman Yud Beis. You'll understand also much deeper the two terms Ma'aseinu v'Deseinu and ultimately how that connects to Tchilas Meisim and Yemeisim Mashiach. Sagt the Rebbe, Mashma shekavanosoi b'meshem etzayin l'Geshon. Now the reason why he alludes, he connects the two. Neisel v'hevshe b'maisal v'destam. In addition, obviously, to there's a difference between the terms. Gamla mavur sham b'maisat tzedakah. Specifically, what the Alter Rebbe explains here regarding the mitzvah of tzedakah. Dalei yirun b'zeh ayin sham. The Rebbe is medayik in the words when you're ma'ayin, when you're going to really look in depth and understand the concepts explained in the Eikev Siman Yud Beis, they understand in a deeper ofen the difference between actions and service. So let's get into it. In other words, let's understand what indeed does the Alter Rebbe explain in Siman Yud Beis and how could that be applied to the two terms of Seinu and V'Deseinu. The Alter Rebbe is explaining there regarding the concept of tzedakah. It's actually the fact that a Jewish person naturally is compassionate and does good deeds. It's because of the chayis. It's because the source from where neshamas come from, it's from Hashem's midas, Hashem's attributes, and when it comes to Hashem's midas, chesed is goiver over din, over gvura. Chesed comes first. Shalach hanikra neshama bas kohen. Therefore, neshama is also referred to in the psukim as bas kohen, the daughter of a kohen. Kohen nisha chesed. We are initially and primarily kindness. Therefore, we give tzedakah. We are naturally kind people because our neshama comes from Hashem's midas. It continues that tzedakah, the tzedakah that a person does because of this nature of a person's neshama, that's called action. Because that's where we say, like we already quoted this, Maisa is something which is hoive, viragul, it's regular, it's normal. From the moment of creation, your neshama, when it was constructed, it already was embedded within it this nature of kindness, because ultimately they are evolved from the Eibish's midas. Your midas come from Hashem's midas, and therefore the fact that you are kind in the teva, the nature of your neshama, is innate. It's not something you necessarily have to earn, accomplish behind it. What's the Rebbe basically telling us here? Unlike we might have thought, Jewish people are naturally kind people. Naturally meaning, even on the most physical way, we are born with tendencies to do kindness. That's what the Rebbe know. Even if, when we're referring to here, the nature, we don't mean that you're naturally a kind person in your nefesh bahamis. We mean naturally in your nefesh lekis. Nevertheless, the tzedakah that's done because of the nature, even the nature of your neshama is ultimately still called ma'isa. Avodah tzedakah. So what would avodah mean? Avodah of tzedakah is when you give tzedakah more than even the nature of your nefesh lekis. Then move on. It's understood. We're not saying here that any time you put effort into something, all of a sudden it's called avodah. Not necessarily. Depends what the effort is. If your effort is just to remove the concealment of your nefesh bahamis, to get out of the way the grubkeit, the coarseness of nefesh bahamis, and to let your neshama shine, that is all still considered ma'isa, because that ultimately is the nature of your neshama. Even if it takes effort, you need to reveal the nature of your neshama. It's all included in the general category of ma'isa, of action, because all you're doing is revealing the nature of your neshama. On the other hand, when I'm talking about service, the service that a person is doing, the avodah is even more, he's stretching the bounds and the limits even of the nature of your neshama. So in other words, it's not pshat, am I toiling or am I just sitting around and doing things because of routine? Of course not. Even when a person toils, you have to see what is the toil. If I'm just expressing my neshama, obviously it takes hard work to get the nefesh bahamis out of the way. But if ultimately all I'm doing is leaving room, giving space for my nefesh lakis to express its own nature, that's still called a ma'isa, still called action. Avodah is when you can go beyond even the nature of nefesh lakis, and that, like we're going to explain, is a concept of mesiras nefesh. Now, next ois is dalid, as well as is hey, also is vav. The Rebbe is going to give many, many examples of where do we see what's taka, the ma'ila of avodah, what's the greatness in the second concept, going against the nature even of nefesh lakis. So let's get right in there. It's explained in other places. We know there's a great advantage on a Baal Tshuva, a person who turns his life around, on a person who is just righteous. And there's really two advantages. Aleph, the first thing that happens when a person does Tshuva, he reveals the strength, to what extent his connection with the Eibusher is. Meaning, even though he sinned. And there was a certain separation that was created. Ultimately, it's only in the revealed senses of the neshama, but not in the essence. And therefore, even after a man sins, he can return. He can literally turn his life around because his essence was never touched. This concept, the fact that Baal Tshuva literally can express and show the fact that his relationship with the Eibusher is not necessarily connected to the actions that he does, but it's really who he is. He is able to reveal that connection. Now, ultimately, that connection exists in a tzaddik as well. It exists in every Jew. A person is Baal Tshuva, a person who sins and nevertheless is able to return. That's a person who can reveal it, bring it out, and that's where you really see that it's apparent. So that's the first mile. The first mile is you get to reveal and express something that an average person or a tzaddik doesn't necessarily need to or never gets a chance to. Beis, what's the second mile? The second advantage is a whole new concept. When a person does a proper tshuva from love, there's a concept where even the sin can be transformed to merit. Now, all of a sudden, there's a completely new type of advantage here that didn't exist even by a tzaddik, even at the helim. In other words, it's not I'm revealing something that always existed. I'm literally recreating. Like it's known, the merits that are transformed from the sin of a rasha actually are greater and have a completely different quality than the mitzvahs of a tzaddik. So it's not that now he has more mitzvahs because the Averis became mitzvahs. The mitzvahs are a completely different type of mitzvah. Like it's known when darkness becomes light, the light is a much greater quality than just regular light. Kumtois, when a yid is able to be in a negative place and he's able to return from there, first of all, he reveals the deepness of his commitment to the Eibusher, but that a tzaddik has as well. He's just revealing it. The second mila is the fact that this is chachos. A sin could become a mitzvah. That's something that a tzaddik doesn't necessarily get a chance to do. Now that Rebbe takes it to the next step, that was one example. Tshuva versus a tzaddik. The Rebbe says that's also the case in the more general picture of a neshama coming down to the world. After the Rebbe tells us the reason why a neshama comes down is to become a Baal Tshuva ultimately. The purpose, the reason why the neshama comes down to our world. Before neshama came down to the world, they were complete, they were righteous, and the advantage, the maila that happens through the neshama by coming down to our world and being embodied is the fact that now it becomes Baal Tshuva, now it needs to deal with the trials and tribulation, with the struggles of creation, with our world. Now the Rebbe tells us, now you have similar to the two concepts we explained. Aleph, the first idea is when the body, the nefesh bahamis, covers over, conceals on the light and the clarity of the neshama. What needs to happen? When you need to fight, and all of a sudden there are deeper connections, deeper koiches, energy that needs to be unleashed. To the extent it literally needs to bring out its essential koiches that are even higher than the hidden koiches. You have hidden koiches that just need to be revealed, and they have essential koiches that need to be awakened. They need to come out somehow. Like Chassidus gives the example of, when you try to bring fire out of a coal, ultimately the fire is there. But when you want to bring fire out of a flintstone, you literally bring out a hela ma'atzmi. So that's beautiful. That's very important. Now the neshama, so to speak, proves how strong it is. When it was heaven, it didn't need to prove itself. When it comes down to here and it still serves the Eibusher and does its purpose, it proves how deep and how great its connection is. But Beis ultimately is a much greater type of advantage. When a person comes down to our world, he creates something completely new. There's a novelty here. And that is the fact that you refine and you elevate the body, the nefesh bahamis, the animal soul, as well as chelkei ba'ilam. All of a sudden you're dealing with objects around you, the entire world, any part of a corner of the world that the Eibusher sends a yid to. He has a purpose to elevate and refine. Ultimately, when a person creates this ischachus, all of a sudden, when I'm dealing with my goof, I'm not revealing anything that was already there. I'm convincing it. I'm recreating it. That's obviously a much greater place, a much greater accomplishment than just revealing the hidden koiches of the neshama. Noisef, and in addition, we also create, accomplish the Eibusher's purpose in creation. But even in yourself, you're creating something new. There's a chiddush over here. There's a novelty. Ultimately, the Rebbe takes it now a step further and says, who is the one who manages to convince the body to love the Eibusher? Who manages to elevate the world around him? Not the body, it's the neshama. So when the neshama is able to get past its own nature, deal with the body, ultimately that maila, that second advantage of ischachus, of a novelty, of something completely new, is granted, is given to the nefesh kiss as well. Maybe we could say the explanation is very simple, because the neshama himself has to create some sort of ischachus by going out of his comfort zone and dealing with the body. So it's not just, the neshama himself reveals his deep koiches. And in the body, there's a ischachus. The neshama himself receives that great maila and advantage of the concept of ischachus. So far we brought two examples, Bali Tshuva, and the neshama come to the world. So there's the maila of just proving himself, and then there's the maila of completely recreating something new. Here we're going to have sort of a third example. Similar, we're just bringing out the point that the neshama, who's the one who does the avodah, actually receives the advantage of ischachus. Similar to what we explained in other places regarding the Abbas Hashem, the love of the Eibusher, the Nefesh Elokis loves Hashem. Then there's an Nefesh Elokis convincing Nefesh Bahamis he as well should love the Eibusher through davening, through contemplation, through his beinus. Ultimately, there's a maila. It's explained that there's an advantage in the love that the Nefesh Elokis convinces the Nefesh Bahamis to feel towards Hashem. Why? Ultimately, the fact that Nefesh Elokis loves Hashem is its own identity, it's its own mitzias, it's its own nature. Ultimately, there's a very selfish aspect to it. Ultimately, what does it want? It wants to literally connect to Hashem in a way that it'll have zero left. There'll be nothing left in the neshama. Like the Alter Rebbe gives the mashal of the fire, that it wants to reconnect its source somewhere up there on high, where there's the shayrish of Eish, even though it knows that when it'll be there, it won't have its own identity. The neshama as well wants to connect to Hashem to the extent it'll lose any selfness to. Seems selfless. Ultimately, there's a selfish aspect. Why? It's its nature. It didn't lose its general form. It didn't do anything that's uncharacteristic for the neshama. On the other hand, when it manages to convince Nefesh Bahamis, and now the Nefesh Bahamis as well loves the Eibusher, now we know the body obviously naturally draws itself and gravitates towards physical pleasure. There's nothing within the Nefesh Bahamis that wants to love the Eibusher. There's nothing. If you're just going to leave it to itself, it's just going to be interested in self-preservation, nothing more. Through the love that the Nefesh Bahamis has now. Obviously, it was accomplished, it was convinced through the avodah that the Nefesh Elokis had within it. Nifsad suraso batal legamri. It's something very special that there's zero selfishness to it. It's not self-serving in any way. The Nefesh Elokis ultimately, it's its nature. Now I'm taking something which is coming from a completely new place that has no potential, so to speak, in any way to love Hashem. The fact that Nefesh Bahamis loves Hashem, that's that's literally completely getting rid of its nature, its identity, and finding something new. And it's explained in these places that when the Nefesh Elokis is able to convince Nefesh Bahamis, he receives that same concept that its love shouldn't be selfish, but it should be selfless as well. And Deb is going to give us more oasis here. What's ultimately the difference? Is the love because I love, or is the love because of what's being loved? By the Nefesh Bahamis, it's clear as day, it's not because of me, I don't need this, it's because Hashem is so true and so ultimate and so great, ultimately I'm going to have to be mivatal myself to Hashem. When it comes to Nefesh Elokis, it seems like it's its own nature. I'm not loving Hashem because of Hashem, I'm loving Hashem because I love Hashem. When Nefesh Elokis is able to convince Nefesh Bahamis, all of a sudden the love becomes not about itself, but it becomes about the Eibishter. Now we have another example. When the neshama deals with the world around, ultimately, what are we doing here? We're taking mundane aspects of creation, making them vessels and conduits to reveal the Eibishter's glory and oneness. This is something completely new. What's the nature of our world? Just like the nature of the Nefesh Bahamis is just to preserve itself, the nature of our world is Helim, the Hester. The word Olam, is from Helim, which means concealment. Ultimately, if you're going to take the world and make it Ois Helim, now it's not concealment anymore. On the contrary, it's actually transparent. It actually reveals its own creator. Obviously, it's not from within the world. There's nothing within the world that pushes it to start recognizing and loving Hashem. It's obviously only coming because of Hashem's greatness. It must be because the Eibishter is so true that at some point the world will have to admit to the extent that the identity of the world becomes one with Hashem. Ultimately, when the person that did this accomplishment, that convinced, so to speak, his body and the world around him, creates by himself, that your avodas will be with complete bittul, losing complete selflessness. Not only because of your own identity, your own mitzias, but it should be because of Hashem, because of Hashem's greatness, Hashem's oneness. So far we gave a few examples here. First of all, regarding a literal Maila of Al Tshuva over at Tzaddik, the fact that he can mahapich zdoinus, which is a chiddush. The Maila when I come down to the world, not just to, prove my commitment, but I'm able to be mevar my guf, which is a chiddush, as well as my chilik in the world, which is a chiddush, as well as the Nefesh Elokis convinces the Nefesh Bahamis to love Hashem, it's a chiddush, as well as when I make the world a Kelef Elikus, that's a chiddush. And we also added another point, because the neshama is ultimately the one who does the avodah, he himself receives this complete oneness with Hashem's complete bittul, and ultimately it's not self-serving anymore. I want to love Hashem because I want to, but it becomes because of Hashem's oneness. Now when I say in a phenomenal way that Rebbe is going to explain, this really explains a very interesting question. What is the whole maila, the greatness, the beauty of a person sacrificing his life to the Eibishter? Now, we know the greatness of Siris Nefesh. They're called Kedoshim. There's no one that could be close in their chamber in Shamayim. But the question becomes, what indeed is so great? Maybe we could be makdish also to all those recently in Eretz Yisrael gave up their life for the Eibishter and Sechasteros. So let's see. This could also explain the great mile and advantage of those that were zoyich to Mrs. Nefesh Pil Mamish Al Kedusha Hashem. And then the Rebbe is going to explain in the brackets why is he bringing this up. It's known publicly. Sha'amur Adoni Ovi Meir Rabbi, my father, Rabbi Yitzchak Bala Elula Nesar V'Huglo Layorin Dachas B'Din Choiko. He was imprisoned, he was exiled to a far-off city in a far-off country because of his service in spreading Yiddishkeit, and he suffered there. First imprisonment for almost a year, and then eventually in the 5 years of Galus, obviously tremendous pain and torture. Naturally, this is actually what hastened and what caused his death, meaning he died al Kiddush Hashem. Now that I have his question. The concept of self-sacrifice is natural. Every neshama is not able to disconnect himself from Hashem. So potentially every single neshama is ready to do it every moment. You're going to ask, okay, but they didn't actually do it. It happens to be, it wasn't necessary. But why should that negate from the connection of Hashem, right? The revelation of this type of essence, the fact that I'm one with Hashem and I'm dying for Hashem, just because it didn't actually happen, it's still true and it still exists. Why is it so great? These people who literally died, every person's ready to die. Okay, so you actually died. What's the difference? The connection, the commitment is still there. Now that Rebbe is going to say, the question becomes greater. Because ultimately you could argue, okay, most people can be Meisei Nefesh, but they never really experienced it, never really felt it. Only a person who is really Meisei Nefesh feels that connection, feels that commitment. But what's the answer? It's not true. We have people who do feel that commitment. For example, the famous story of the Gemara in Brachos, where they were bringing Rabbi Akiva, one of the Asaru Gemalchos, to kill him, and they were combing his body with Masreka Shal Barzel, with combs of iron. And he was saying, Kriya Shema, and his Talmidim asked him, Rabbeinu Adkan, are you able to literally, rejoice? He was smiling and saying Shema. And he told him, absolutely, Kol Yoma Isi Mitzar, my entire life, I wanted to fulfill this pasuk of Bechol Nafshecha, which means Asru Neitel Nafshecha, literally ready to sacrifice your life. And he never had the opportunity, and now that I do, of course, I'm going to smile. This is what Rabbi Akiva said. In other words, Rabbi Akiva's entire life wanted Mesiras Nefesh. That seemingly is Gilui of Mesiras Nefesh. So what was missing? The fact that his entire life he inspired to fulfill the literal meaning of V'chol Nafshecha, to give up his life. By him, the potential Mesiras Nefesh actually shone in an actual way. So what was lacking? It happened to have not been necessary. He didn't actually have to die. Actually, startles us. So why was he so sad? He says he'd stire. He said he was pained his entire life. Why can't I actually die on Mesiras Nefesh? Why do you need to actually die? As long as this commitment, this oneness, this connection is revealed, what's wrong? What's lacking? So what's the answer? According to what we just explained. All the different examples we gave in the second Maila, the Etzim, the Ischachus. Very simple. The fact that every single Yid potentially is ready to be Meisei Nefesh, ready to literally put his life on the line, not to rebel, not to betray Chas v'Shalom, the Eibishter, is Mitzad HaNeshama. This is because your soul has that nature. And even like Rabbi Akiva, who literally made it one, when a person is able to awaken that feeling, that commitment, he's literally ready that if necessary, he's going to give his life for it. That's all. The essence of the soul is now being revealed, but ultimately it's the soul, it's the neshama. Ultimately, similar to what we explained earlier, the fact that neshama wanted to come home with Hashem is its nature. The fact that it loves Hashem has a selfish aspect to it, it's self-serving. There's nothing new about it. You didn't create yourself with that nature. That nature was embedded within your creation. That's who you are. You're one with Hashem. What happens the moment a person literally sacrifices his life? All of a sudden, we are creating something, a novelty that didn't exist before. The Rebbe says a few aspects. First of all, it comes through different people around you. The people who are so far, the people who are torturing you, the people who are trying to force you to be kofer, to rebel against Hashem. The moment you choose to indeed endure all these pain, you revealed the purpose of them, and therefore you elevate the godly sparks within them, and you elevate them to Kedusha. Which is an amazing thing that Rebbe says here. The people Their purpose was to make you reveal that commitment. Kum tois, when they do it, they have fulfilled their purpose and you elevated them. So the first thing is you were poil, aliyah, and the people around, the people that were forcing you. Obviously, it fell very low down. People that are literally not just koifer and Hashem, but they're killing you for you not rebelling against Hashem. These tzaitzes that fell so low is a tremendous chiddush now for them to, so to speak, have their purpose in creation being fulfilled and being elevated. He made that says in addition to that, in addition to your surroundings, it's also you yourself. There's a more advantage here in literally giving up your life. When a person literally sacrifices his life, it doesn't just happen in your soul, it happens with your natural body as well. Not just does he not oppose it, ultimately at that moment, even your body wants to be Meisei Nefesh, wants to give up his life for Hashem, literally and actually. Now, like we explained earlier, there's nothing within the body, the Nefesh HaTivis, that should want to give up his life. He is literally all about self-preservation. That's his identity and that's his essence. When it is ready to sacrifice itself for Hashem, obviously through the inspiration of the Neshama, it's first of all novelty and it's completely against his nature. Now we understand what's the greatness of a person who literally gives up his life for Hashem. That it says, right? The fact that they're so celebrated. Why? That Mesiras Nefesh. Because of the essence. It is the nature of the neshama. If it's the nature of the neshama, it's self-serving. It still serves its own identity, its own nature. When a person literally gives up his life for the Eibusher, because this is against its nature, the nature of the body, so obviously it loses its entire identity. So when a person is literally Meisei Nefesh, not just did he elevate the people around him, not just that he elevated his body, which is a tremendous chiddush. Now the neshama receives a greater type of bittul. A greater type of bittul, a bittul which isn't because of himself, but it's true bittul. It's not self-serving, but it's 100% selfless. So again, the Rebbe says, "Amar to gevart in this ois." The Mesiras Nefesh b'poil is a deeper commitment than Mesiras Nefesh b'koyach. Mesiras Nefesh b'koyach is natural. Mesiras Nefesh b'poil is not natural. On every level, there's an advantage of actuality. The people around you elevate, the world, it's a chiddush, the body, which is a chiddush, and then the neshama receives that nekuda of chiddush. Let's see, the next ois, and I'm going to give another example where we see this really in the much bigger picture of creation. We know we have a first tzimtzum. The tzimtzum is a contraction of the Eibusher concealed his light to give place to create a world. The first step of Yerida, the first step of descent, when the Eibusher wants to start a chain of evolution to eventually create our world the way we know it, we know that the purpose of the tzimtzum is in order for eventually to have the concept of revelation. From this evolved eventually that every time there's a concept of a Yerida, of a descent, it is for a greater ascent, a greater aliyah. The Rebbe says there is similar to these two concepts, these two advantages. First of all, something very simple. Now, oneness of Hashem can be in the world as well. The oneness that existed before can now be more revealed in another realm, in another place where it couldn't have been before. Before the Eibusher completely removed his light aside, there couldn't have been a world, but the world couldn't recognize God. Obviously, the revelation didn't exist within our world. There was no world. All of a sudden, we accomplished now something new. Now, in Seif, the God's endless, infinite light, energy can be felt in a limited creation. Ultimately, it's not a real chiddush. The or, the one is the truth of Hashem, was always around. It just couldn't have been felt and experienced in a world, and now it could be experienced and felt in a world, so there's nothing new here. There's just a new space for it to be revealed. It's a Gilui Halim. Obviously, this oneness existed before, it just didn't exist within the context, within the framework of a limited creation. Beis, what is the second Maila, the second Aliyah that happens with inspiration? Now that we have an imperfect world, now that we have a world which is a sheker, now that we have a voida of a person, I'm able to reveal something completely new that didn't exist before the tzimtzum. Not just that is greater than the literal regular light that existed before. It's even greater than the essence of the light. It's revealing the essential hiddenness that was never even potentially able to be revealed. In other words, there's something called Helen, which is hiddenness, concealment. Ultimately, concealment could always be revealed. And is Helam Ha'atzmi, essential concealment which cannot be revealed, that is revealed specifically through Avodah Birurim. Ultimately, the Rebbe is telling us here is when a person does Avodah here in our world, he creates something that didn't exist before the Tzimtzum, which is obviously a phenomenal concept. Now, give all these examples. Really, the essence of the last few oasis explaining how you have something called a chidush. There's two concepts, two mailas and a Baal Tshuva over at Tzaddik. The fact that he reveals a commitment and the fact that he creates something completely new. Now let's tie that into the stages of Geula. The fact that I'm bringing back something that was there before in a new place, but it's the same light, just in a new place. And the fact that I create something completely new, the Helam Ha'atzmi, Yil Asid Lavi will be revealed and apparent, will be experienced in the world to come, the world of Geula. It's going to be in stages. So with that can explain, give clarity in the different conflicting midrashim about the era of Mashiach. At one place it seems to imply that the Eibusher will make a tremendous feast for the righteous. Another place it says in the world to come there is no eating, there is no drinking. So what's the answer? How do you reconcile? It's literally dealing with two different times, two different stages. The first thing, we're going to have a Suda. Now, there's a literal Suda, but also means a tainu, which could be experienced, it could be felt, it could be digested. That is the concept of a Suda. What is that gilui that can be experienced by a human being? It's the gilui that existed before. Now that there's a world, the world is able to feel it, but it's ultimately something that is gilui ashayich. It's Helam, it was concealed, but it can be revealed, and therefore eventually we can experience it. What's going to come next? A certain type of tainug, which is so essential, so one with Hashem, it literally can't be experienced and felt. Which is literally Helam Ha'atzmi, essential concealment, which is not even, there's no potential for this concealment to be revealed, and that's going to be revealed as well, and that's something that cannot be felt, it cannot be experienced, and therefore it's a time with no eating, no drinking, there's going to be no consumption. In a very general term, the first stage is Mashiach, the next stage is Ches HaMesim, where we know when the resurrection, the death will come, will be about the body, will be more essential, more atzmiistic, less giluim. Let's see, the Amar Razal, call Nevi'im Kulma, Mashiach. They say, Razal teach, whenever the Nevi'im were giving Nevuas, describing the era of Geula, they were only describing Mashiach. The next world, the world after that, which Chizz explains the Elam Atchiyah, they never even fathomed, they never began to see. All the visions were the things that can be seen and conceived in the mind. Anything past that, the next stage, they never spoke about. Tying that into Oizvav, where we had the two different accomplishments to the Tzimtzum. So in the first stage of Geula, we'll have the first revelation, the revelation of Ein Sof that existed before, and now we're going to reveal it in the world. Which again was the purpose of the Tzimtzum, that there should be Ein Sof in the Welt. We don't have that today, we're going to have it when Mashiach comes. So again, when the first Kufa in the time of Mashiach, we'll have the revelation of the Eibusher's infinite light that was already apparent, already revealed and experienced before the Tzimtzum. Now it's going to be in a Welt. But in the second stage, the stage of the resurrection, there's going to be that time that no one ever felt, no one ever experienced, no Navi ever envisioned it. It's going to be the essence of Hashem, which is essentially hidden, that cannot and will never be revealed, and that will be experienced when Mashiach comes. Giving a little bit more clarity, if you recall, the Rebbe's father pointed out how Ma'aseinu v'Avodaseinu was totally in Moshe Mashiach and Ches HaMesim. So now we explain a little better what's Ches HaMesim. It's the essence, it's the Ischachus, it's the second Nekuda. What's in Meisei Mashiach? Mashiach is like the first Maila of Al Tshuva, the revelation, revealing the commitment, proving the commitment. Now let's tie it back into Ma'aseinu V'Deseinu Takeh. Very simple. The first, again, you look a little bit more in detail, in nuance. Mashiach is dependent on Ma'aseinu, on our Ma'asim and our actions. The Gilui, on the other hand, revelation of resurrection will be Tolui, is reliant on Avodaseinu, on our service. How come? Very simple. We know we're not just doing mitzvahs and eventually Eibusher will reward us independently of what we did, but actually the actions that we do create the space, create the revelations of Geula. Our mitzvahs have to be very connected, related, similar to what's going to be experienced. Therefore, the mitzvah is similar to the schar, because again, these are drawing lights that are being created through the mitzvah. If I want to reveal the Ein Sof that was here already before, I need to do an avodah of Ma'aseinu, which we explained is a neshama revealing its nature. Now, is it hard? Is it toil? Absolutely. Do I have to get my nefesh hamas out of the way? Absolutely. But ultimately, I'm only revealing something that already existed. I'm revealing the nature of the neshama. And what that accomplishes in reward, in return, is revealing the Ein Sof, which was here before, which is here all along. It's Ma'aseinu. Ultimately, if I want to create the Eibusher's essential hiddenness, Helamatzmi, or Chodesh is something completely new that needs to be created through Avodah. It comes through the effort, which is completely higher, even than the nature of Gam Shalakis. The nature of the neshama. So you create something that didn't exist within your neshama, the avodah mesiras nefesh, and that will bring the gilui atzmus. That is also something completely new. Hela ma'atzmi, kumtes merde geschmack. Basically explaining the one line that the Rebbe's father wrote, the comment that he wrote on the side of the Tanya, when we do maaseh, when we reveal the nature of our neshama. Right? Like the Rebbe's father connected it to Gersa Kodesh, where Ma'aseinu means revealing the teva of the neshama. That's when we'll have Yemei Mashiach revealing the Ein Sof. When we'll have avodah, we'll have service, we'll go beyond even the nature of an nefesh kiss and we'll create something new. That's when we'll have Gilui Atzmus, essence, Gilui the Helamat. Tying it now in the last Eisei says is back to the original question of Ahoya Eikev Tishmu. Let's explain now. Tishmu Vadai. That's the concept here. Where in the last Kufa of Galus, we're absolutely certain that the Jewish people will fulfill Torah mitzvahs. The first thing is we're certain if the Eibusher had a purpose in creation, it's absolutely going to be fulfilled, it's going to happen. And we're in that direction. Both things are going to accomplish. Like we explained, these are two reasons for the original Tzimtzum. So if the Eibusher made that Tzimtzum for two reasons, these two reasons will eventually, obviously, need to come to fruition. We're obviously going to have the experience of the Ein Sof that was there all along, which is Agil de Meisei Mashiach. Also the essential hiddenness, the greater, the Chidush, which is Tchias HaMeisim. Simple question. You're going to ask me a question. Ultimately, this is all dependent on our actions and our avodah of our Shus Nusun Chol Adam. A person has free choice. Regarding this, we were promised there will be no Jew left behind. Every single Jew is going to fulfill the purpose in Ma'aseinu and actions. Which is the Yigiyah, the toil and Torah mitzvahs, which is more than the nation of Bahamas. In other words, getting our animal soul out of the way and expressing our neshama. The Gam of Edeseinu also in stage 2. Even more than the nature of even the neshama, which is avodah, which is novelty, which is creation, right? And that's the explanation why. Eikev also refers to the heels of Mashiach, meaning the last kuf of the last generation. So in addition to simply, that is when we're certain Jewish people will fulfill the Eibusher. So in addition to the fact that we know that's when Jewish people will fulfill Torah mitzvahs, but more than that, that's when we know that avodah will happen. Until that point, throughout all of history, Jewish people are doing the Eibishter's will, they're revealing the neshama, they're even fighting the nefesh bahamis, but ultimately, do we have Mesiras Nefesh? Not necessarily. Why? Because we didn't necessarily need Mesiras Nefesh. Specifically, in the latest generation, where now, to serve the Eibishter, you need to even go past the nature of your own neshama. You need to literally give yourself up for the Eibishter, and therefore, now we have Eikev Tishmu, now we have the avodah of Mesiras Nefesh because of the Choshech HaGolus, and therefore now we're creating the greater Maila of Tchias HaMesim. And especially the Tzemach Tzedek does bring in the literal Eikev is connected to the heel of Esav that Yaakov held onto, representing the fact that sometimes Jewish people need to elevate and refine even the lowest things, like the klip of Esav. Gam, but tzaddikim, now that I was going to conclude with a very emotional concept connected now to the Rebbe's father and to all tzaddikim that needed to give up their life literally for the Eibishter. You're going to tell me that tzaddikim, that the concealment, that the darkness of Golus is not dark in comparison to them. They have light, they have clarity. Kolkach, at least not as much as the average person. They're definitely not dealing with transformation. They're not transforming sin into merit. They don't have sin. So ultimately the question becomes, how are they going to create the greatest, highest things of Gula Gilei Etzim if they don't have the second Maila, the Maila of Baal Tshuva? So they don't deal with Averis. They don't even deal with their Gufa as much because their Gufa is refined. Even before they start to do Avodah, their body is not as coarse, not as gram. Ultimately, the Eibishter still gives them away. What's the way, Ariel? They are through giving them tests. And especially when there comes a time when you need to literally give up your soul, right? Give up your body, die for the Eibishter. That's how these tzaddikim have the opportunity to elevate, refine even the sparks, the godly energy within Gimel Klippus HaTameis, the lowest things. And then the Rebbe concludes, and now that already many tzaddikim accomplished this concept of elevating the lowest things through their self-sacrifice, so we receive, it's transmitted to us through Yerushak. Like we say, V'shamar Hashem Lekecha was the concept of Mesiras Nefesh. Eibishter infuses his essence into the Machshav V'Maisa, but ultimately it's Asher Nishbal Avisecha. He gave it to our forefathers, and we receive it through them. Which obviously doesn't just mean the biological children, but it means the students, any person who receives from these tzaddikim. Shalom the Teirasim that has studied their Teir Shalachan Tzichim Yosem Nisenis for today. We don't need any more Nisenis. We don't need any more tests. So we don't need literal sacrifice, chas v'shalom. Now we need Mesiras HaRatzon. The word nefesh, will, could also mean ratzon, will. We need to give up our will, which is sometimes can be even more difficult. Like the Rebbe would often say, the avodah in our generation is not to die on Mesiras Nefesh, but to live every day with Mesiras Nefesh. Like the Maamar Vatat Tzaveh, where the avodah today is to be broken. The fact that we're in Golus, even when we're in comfortable situation. We'll have the opportunity to do obviously the Maisa and the Avodah, to do reveal our neshama, but even go past that, even have the Avodah Mesiras Nefesh, but in a way of menucha varchav, in a way of tranquility, in a way of broadness, literally, truthfully, besimchot of love with true joy, and we'll have the fulfillment of the promise that ultimately the dead will rise. And the Rebbe's father, Levi Yitzchak, the Balei Lula, the one whose yahrzeit is today, will be among them. Will go together towards the ultimate redemption by Gol Dedan Mamish. That was our Maamar. The Rebbe begins and ends the Maamar with the V'hoya Eikev, basically explaining to us how Eikev is connected to Ikshus and Meshicha. The Avodah in the last generation is what's going to bring the greatest essence of Geula, the greatest revelation of Gilei Atzmus, and we explain how come. Ultimately, because Mesiras Nefesh is a Jew's essence, and Mashiach is Hashem's essence, and in the whole middle of the Maamar we explained the Vart of the Rebbe's father, how it's totally Ma'aseinu V'Edeseinu. You had many generations where Jewish people were revealing their soul, but the last generations where Jewish people have to go even past the nature of their soul, the idea of Mesiras Nefesh. And we gave many examples. We also explained how that's the Maila in actual literal Mesiras Nefesh, where you have to go the next step. You're not just doing a self-serving purpose of connecting to Hashem, but you're actually, first of all, affecting the world around you, affecting your body, which is an absolute chiddush, and that's the chiddush that will bring the chiddush of Geula. You should have a wonderful day.